We're about to get into a really uncomfortable topic, the economics of conflict. Because when you start digging into it, you find this deeply disturbing paradox at its very heart.
You've probably heard someone say something like this before, right? It's this provocative, almost cynical idea that war is good for GDP.
And yeah, that's the paradox that no one really wants to talk about out loud. It kind of suggests that, mass-scale destruction could somehow be economically productive, but how could that possibly be true?
So that's the big question we're going to tackle in this explainer. Is it actually true? Can war really make a country richer? Let's unpack this thing. Okay, first things first. To really get a handle on the huge shift that happens during a war, we need a baseline. Let's talk about what a normal, everyday, peacetime economy looks like.
So, in a peace economy, the goal is pretty straightforward. Make life better. Improve our quality of life. The focus moves away from heavy industry, like steel, and more towards services, all the stuff that makes our lives more comfortable, more convenient. And what drives all this growth? Well, it's you. It's us, the consumer. It's all about our confidence and the choices we make. The whole system is built for peak efficiency, not for redundancy. I mean, why would you build two factories when one gets the job done just fine?
Now, let's watch what happens when that entire system gets completely flipped on its head. When a country goes to war, everything, and I mean everything, changes.
All of a sudden, the main customer in the economy isn't you anymore. It's the government. And to pay for all this stuff, central banks just start printing money to keep this massive new demand going. Private companies, they get basically militarized. They stop making cars and start making tanks. The entire labor force shifts to whatever the government decides is essential. And the free market, yeah, that often gets thrown out the window, replaced by things like rationing and central planning.
And this slide really nails the core difference. See, in a peace economy, success means more choices for you, more kinds of phones, more places to go on vacation. But in a war economy, there's only one metric for success: winning the war. That's it. The whole philosophy shifts from building comfort for people to just building production for the state, no matter what it costs.
Okay, so if a war economy is so restrictive and frankly kind of miserable for the average person, where on earth did this idea that it's good for GDP come from? Well, this is where we get into the great economic illusion.
The classic example everyone points to is World War II. During the war, US GDP grew by a staggering 70%. I mean, just think about that for a second. The entire economic output of the country grew by almost 3/4 in just a few short years. On paper, it looks like the greatest economic boom of all time.
But, and this is the huge but, at the very same time, private consumption, the actual stuff people were buying to make their own lives better, it fell by 10%. So the country's economic output was exploding, but the average person could actually buy less. How does that even work?
It works because of this one absolutely critical point. GDP is not wealth. They are not the same thing. GDP just measures economic activity. It doesn't care one bit if that activity is building a hospital or building a bomb that's going to be blown up a week later. To the GDP calculation, it's all the same.
So while that GDP number looks fantastic, the real story underneath is a lot darker. The national debt just explodes to pay for it all. All that amazing human innovation, it gets redirected away from creating value and towards creating destruction. And you get this permanent inflation setting in as more and more money chases fewer and fewer consumer goods. The numbers look strong, but the society itself is getting weaker.
So why are we talking about a lesson from World War II today? Because these war economy dynamics, they aren't just some dusty thing from the history books. We're seeing echoes of this stuff right now, all across the world.
Just look around. You've got the US and Europe getting back into re-militarization and industrial policy on a scale we haven't seen in decades. You've got Russia, which has completely pivoted its entire industrial base toward making weapons. And then you have China, which has perfected this dual-use tech model where the line between civilian and military tech is intentionally blurred, so that cool new consumer drone tech can be used by the military tomorrow.
And this is what's so important to understand. A war economy doesn't always show up with a big, loud declaration of war. It can be built in silence. All you really need is fear and a whole lot of funding. It's often just a slow, quiet pivot in a country's priorities.
Which brings us to the true price, the real costs that never ever show up in a GDP report. This is the hidden balance sheet of a war economy.
You see, the numbers don't show you the lost trust in free markets when the government takes over. They don't show the slow erosion of the middle class as it gets squeezed by inflation and taxes.
they certainly don't show the massive debt burdens we're leaving for our kids to deal with, or maybe even more subtly, the psychological damage of just getting used to living in a permanent state of crisis.
At the end of the day, it really just boils down to a fundamental trade-off. Peace economies, at their best, are designed to reward comfort, individual choice, and your well-being. War economies are designed to reward one thing: control, centralization, state power. And that leaves us with this final, pretty sobering thought. Wars don't just destroy buildings and end lives. They fundamentally change the economic DNA of a country. They rewrite the entire balance sheet, and those changes can last for generations. So maybe the real question isn't whether war is good for GDP. Maybe the real question is, what are we giving up to pay for it? What comfort, what choices, and what kind of future?